Hello, welcome to Bent TV. I'm Andy McNamara. Tonight we are speaking about GLBTI disability, and the more informed people here that I'm speaking with are Ben Patterson on my right, who is from GLBT Disability Support Services, Greg Paxton on my immediate left, and then Adam Sharp on my far left, who's also from GLBT Disability Support Services. Now, gentlemen, I just want to make it very clear, I think GLBTI disability is an important issue, but I know nothing. So I really want everyone to jump in and highlight the obvious issues.
I guess that's pretty much what we're doing at the moment, as it is as well. I think as a whole, the GLBT disability support thing is very new on the spectrum.
So raising awareness is the biggest need?
The main thing at the moment is, actually raising awareness. It's something that's quite new, actually, even just speaking about sexuality in disability for a start. Like getting the message out there that, like having a disability doesn't mean that you're not a sexual being and you are allowed to express yourself freely.
I can imagine many families with a disabled child, this is a question for everyone, I guess, they'd be so focused on the disability and the related issues that they would think and assume and sometimes even hope that the person is asexual and don't want to deal with any sexual issues at all.
I think the focus is more on the disability, and I think coming from like a family perspective where you're actually caring for someone with a disability, and that tends to be the main focus on how you care for them, and obviously leaving the sexuality aside. It's like, there's more important things to look at.
I think most parents don't want to know about their children's sexuality, because I think that most parents think because their son or daughter has a disability, they just don't think that they need to know about the
sexuality as well.
Yes.
I think, you've also got the aspect, I mean, it's hard enough for any of us to come out being gay, let alone having a disability, and there's so many fears, in regards to, say, going to clubs.
Minority within a minority, isn't it?
It is.
And really, it creates isolation.
Well, an interesting comment was said to me the other day. We're talking about sexuality and awareness for GLBTI people with disabilities, and somebody said, why is Australia so slow to take on the whole topic of sexual diversity? And it's an interesting question. Of course, I have no answer to that. There's a lot of work at the moment being done in the UK, the United States, and Canada. But I think that because it's always been such a taboo subject, and it's a scary subject,
So those countries are the leaders in terms of GLBTI disability.
Certainly the UK. Certainly
the
UK is a leader. They're doing a lot of work.
So what sort of things are they doing? Is it just awareness? Is it facilities? Is it support services?
Not so much in support services, which is unfortunate. In regards to advocacy movement throughout those countries, and even Australia for that matter, is really creating such a voice. Sexuality and diversity, I guess we've started talking about that.
Oh, that's the
I don't
social
know, Greg, in the
climate
last
Australia at the
12
moment
months.
as well.
Okay. Adam and Ben, and Greg, you may want to contribute to this too. Maybe you can tell us some examples of some people you've worked with, who are gay, some of their issues with dealing with their family and coming out, and some of the things they face.
Yeah, well, I suppose like a client of mine in particular, and obviously a gay man, mid-40s, and has spent most of his life repressed and not being able to actually say, I'm gay, and not even just I'm gay, but I am a sexual being and I have needs and all this kind of stuff. It's very taboo. It's put down. Let's focus on your disability and let's not talk about your sexuality. And when I started looking after this particular individual, one of his wishes was to basically go to a sex shop and change his DVDs. And that's something that he'd been looking for years, like one of his carers that could actually just take him to a shop to do what, any
Just
one
a
of us
basic thing,
can
yeah.
do.
And very often people with disabilities are living at home, and it's probably an even stranger thing to ask your parents if that's
Exactly.
what's required.
Or
to
if
do
you're
it.
in community housing or something like that as well, and you've got, like heterosexual staff working for you, that's something that they're not particularly interested in doing with you. It's a little bit scary. It's kind of, it's breaking the mold a little bit, and it's something that they don't really want to address.
Wow.
I think it's about creating an awareness of, again, and I like to use the word sexual diversity, because it covers every aspect, not just the GLBTI community, but other areas. And I think that with a lot of service providers, it's been such a taboo subject, but they're bound by their policies and procedures and what's deemed, appropriate and acceptable. And, when you're a service provider, I guess, relying on government funding and you're constantly under the thumb of the public eye, you really kind of like want to be careful in what you're doing. And I think, seriously, Greg, this is a reason why the GLBTI community has been so forgotten, because it's just too taboo. And I think in mainstream community, there's still a lot of discussions and talk about gay awareness or GLBTIQ awareness. So to put that spiel on having a disability, it is a very hard subject. And a lot of subjects, and I think it's not that organisations don't want to address it, they just don't know how.
Yeah, that's it really. They just don't know
Greg,
how
you'll
to
have
start
the
it.
perfect thing about that.
When I first came out, it was such a different world. I came back out in the early 90s,
Right.
and the first event I went to was Kerry's backyard.
Right.
For those people who can remember the
Showing your age, Gregory.
backyard and the good old exchange, which doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, and wheelchair access wasn't an issue?
No, wheelchair wasn't an issue. But I've never been to Club 80 for obvious reasons.
Okay, it's got stairs, I'm assuming.
for the 4 floors.
Okay. So accessibility is an ongoing issue, even on top of all the other issues.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to a break now on Ben TV. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Please stay with us. We're talking about GLBTI disability issues. Hi, welcome back to Ben TV. I'm Andy McNamara, and I'm speaking with Ben, Greg, and Adam.
And hello.
And we are speaking about GLBTI disability issues. And I would like to start by asking you all a question. Gay and lesbian has become a bit more of an accepted issue the last few years, but transgender and transsexual is still a long way behind, I think. And even though plenty of families and maybe workers with a gay or lesbian person might have some issues, they'd be horrified with someone, in their wheelchair or whatever saying, "I want to cross-dress." It would really throw them, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's another taboo subject. Like it's like we are slowly becoming more comfortable with like gay, lesbian, but then like
Just don't touch on the
transgender
frog.
and that, but to actually go beyond that again, it's a little bit God, what are we talking about? It's a little bit uncomfortable. But just as an example, we have a client that's hopefully going to be coming on board shortly, and he's expressed interest in drag school.
Fantastic.
Which is something that you know, imagine anybody else taking them to drag schools, like as you know, but actually being allowed to have that freedom of choice to experience that and to experience that side of his life is, you know, that's something fantastic. Yeah.
I noticed this woman in who lives in Box Hill, and I knew her way back when we went to school with him at the time, and she'd had a hell of a fight.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
I guess, and it's interesting, as we've been talking about, Craig and I have been talking about so many issues for 5 years. And these issues are not just in Australia, they're in Canada or America. I remember when I lived in Canada supporting a young individual with a disability, living in a residential setting, coming out as a gay guy, then wanting to, becoming a cross-dresser and wanting to perform. Obviously, the services, they just couldn't cope. And, you know, I ended up working with him. And there are other issues as well, you know, in regards to, you know, where do I go to have sex? You know, how do I talk about these issues? Getting yourself in trouble, you know, things like that.
Well, the
now,
more awareness there is, the more safety there is when it comes to that issue as well. Like if it's a topic that can't be spoken about, then you're going to find that people are putting themselves in risky situations. Whereas if it's actually spoken about and put out there, then, you know, there's sex education, there's, you know, like groups that you can go out in where you're not exposing yourself to risk.
So thank God for Facebook. That's what I've got to say.
The internet is a great friend service for a lot of unusual
and that's actually
groups.
a big help. That's internet, Facebook.
Yeah.
That's bridging the gap as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So I might just explain to our viewers. Adam and Ben, you work in a company called GLBT Disability Services. You specifically work with gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender,
Intersex and queer.
queer, disabled people of various types who just getting them access to the right groups and supporting them and
it's
and
really
accepting
about
their differences.
it's really about I suppose community inclusion. So taking people who have been isolated because of their sexual identity, and bringing them back into the society again, and letting them realise that, you know, they're not alone. Like statistics in Victoria alone show that there's about 22,000 people who are disabled and identify as just being gay or lesbian, and that's without even looking at, you know, intersex, queer, you know, like
And I guess
that as well.
I guess for some of those people, just meeting someone to say, actually, you're fine and you're normal, is a huge part of it.
That's exactly
let
it.
alone anything
You're
specific.
quite normal, and there's other groups of people who, you know, identify exactly the same as you, and
I'm happy to take you to whatever
and
group.
here we go. Let's have fun, enjoy it. Like, it's not something to be scared of. It's something to be proud of. Enjoy it, and you know, that's one less hurdle you have to face in life. Like,
I was reading a survey that was done in the UK a couple of years ago. 40,000 people identified as GLBTIQ with disabilities. Out of that 40,000 people, there were about 1,500 people that said that they were receiving adequate supports and services in regards to sexual awareness. That's because
it's insane, isn't
it's
it?
a hard
Yeah.
subject.
Yeah.
You know, in regards to, you know, being a service provider and you have staff that are heterosexual, obviously they're not going to know how to support, you know, what kind of resources to link into. And it is. It's, I
to
mean,
connect you back into the community and remove that
They-
isolation.
There definitely needs training, but I can't see DHS doing the training at this stage.
Greg, the Department of Human Services, they do work in regards to the staff, in regards to training and awareness. However, run by straight staff, they're at a loss on where to start. So there has been an awareness there, but as Greg's saying,
Yeah. Oh, it's you know, it's Australian government as well that there is recognition of an issue. It's just how to go about doing something.
I have to
on
admit,
it.
the issue had not occurred to me in any time ever until we, Bent TV, received an email a couple of months ago saying, hey, this is an issue you should have a think about. Just have not even...
It's very much across the board, even within the disability sector. Like there's no recognition that this is an issue, which is kind of why we're doing this, to create awareness and let people know that that there is a need for this. Like,
There was. I've only had one little thing a couple of months ago. A friend of mine was volunteering for a help group, and they said, "Oh, you're gay. You should go and help this guy," because they were a bit shocked by this guy, I think. And he was sent to help a blind guy who wanted to go to Sexpo to buy a new dildo, and and you know,
could you say that?
and it's quite amusing, quite funny, bit of a thing, and they're all in boxes, and the blind man can't see them, but and so my friend had to describe them all, and but that's a service that anyone might want to do. And
it's a funny story, but
it's a real need.
It's a reality.
In reality,
and
absolutely.
it's something that shouldn't be taboo, and it's something that it's like, well, hilarious, but let's do it. Like the same rights as anybody else to go and buy a dildo if you want. Like.
And on that thought, we're going to have a break now and let our viewers have a think about that. You're on Bent TV. We are talking GLBTI disability. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to Bent TV. We are talking about GLBTI and disability tonight. And I'd like to welcome Kath Duncan. Welcome, Kath.
Hey, Andy.
Now, I could jump straight to the topic, but I think we might jump into the topic of you instead of our topic of tonight.
Twist my arm.
Give us a brief summary of your history in media, please.
Well, it's really good to be here in a community TV station, because this is where I started.
Right.
Was in community radio in like the grungiest, dirtiest Sydney radio station called Radio Skid Row, which years later is still going.
Okay.
You wouldn't have picked that at the time, I can tell you. But I also worked in public TV in Sydney as well, working with Metro TV and Cat TV and all these other people. And that's where it started. And really, what actually happened was a friend who I was working with at Radio Skid Row, who I thought was... Oh, gee, I'd hate to hear me say this about him. But anyway, I thought he was just okay as a journalist. Walked in one day and said, "Oh, I've got a shift at Triple J." And I was like, really? And within like 24 hours, I was up there going, yeah, well, you've taken him on, like I'm better, and all this and la la la. So that's kind of pretty much how it started, out of envy. And, I did my degree in Sydney. And somewhere in doing my degree, which was a really prestigious degree in Sydney, it's at UTS, it's called the Bachelor of Arts Communications, they started educating us about more than just, how to turn things on and move things around and all this. And I started to see that, as a person with disability, or as a disabled person, I wasn't anywhere. And I started to see that there could be this kind of, marriage of my disability stuff with my media production. And in a way, if you can understand, that's like this big creative cake that I've been baking for 30 years, and throwing in a bit of other skills of this and more writing and, oh, look, the internet, blah, blah. And the queerness is the icing on that cake.
Okay.
So the queerness is kind of galloped along there with all the other stuff. But, if it comes down to it, I kind of put myself in that kind of like bisexual, queer capacity, wandering thingy, sexuality thing, whereas my disability is very much for me a constant. That's my big identity thing, is the cripple thing, freak pride, pride in difference and all that. And the queerness thing is the fun part of my life.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I don't like to get too earnest about it, really.
Okay. So you don't think it's been an enormous issue from the sound of it, the queerness part, in any sort of combination with a disability?
Well, look, this is just for me, but this is something that I've really worked. So I grew up in this suburban street in Sydney that was so freaking ordinary that like two of my sisters married guys who lived on the same street. It was a long street, admittedly. But I always had this inkling that my difference gave me the capacity to be different. And so, when I came out to my mum, admittedly my dad was dead, but that was a bit sudden. Who could have picked that? But when I came out to my mum, I was just thinking, if she makes an issue out of this, she can just, go and whatever. You know what I mean? And she was like, oh, I'm just as long as you're happy, Kath. And I think that for me, and I'm not saying this for all disabled people, but for me, that my differences have allowed me to have far greater horizons than my very like lower middle class, sort of, you know, diasporic kind of very banal family allowed for me. You know what I mean?
So there's good and bad in everything. Like there's a.
Well, you know, it's yes, and good, bad, and brilliant. You know what I mean? Like, yes, it's a pain in the ass sometimes when, you know, I get up and my leg is uncomfortable because I wear an above knee prosthesis. So I don't have a knee, and you know, this is all kind of like metal and fiberglass and stuff. And every so often, particularly when it gets warmer or I do more exercise, whatever, you know, I'll rub kind of, you know, holes in myself, and it'll be very uncomfortable. And I'll remember that, and I'll go, shit's being a cripple. But sort of most of the rest of the time, the sort of the advantages it's brought to my life, once I started working on turning disability into art, you know, and for that matter, difference into art, you know, I became a one-woman travelling freak show in a good way, and I get to go, serious to God, I get to go all over the world with that.
So tell us some of the work you've been doing over those years. Like at Triple J, start there. What were you doing at Triple J?
Daily reporting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd be writing stuff, you'd be on air a little bit as well.
Yeah, though mainly just for little reports. Like when they start you there, and in those days, it's changed so much, such a tragedy. But in those days, Triple J actually had this commitment to talk, not just playing whatever that they play. So every hour you would have, you know, like a 5-minute news break, and in that you had like, you know, 1 or 2 1-minute, 2-minute bits. Reports. So they'd send you out. My favourite one was going to cover Roger Rogerson's committal hearing. You guys don't know Roger Rogerson, huge corrupt New South Wales policeman.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was having a committal hearing, blah, blah, blah. They just meet you at the door with the gear and give you the cab charge. You're down there, you cover it, you come back, you put it to where, you turn it around, blah, blah, blah. So it's daily journalism.
Yeah.
But, you know, at some point, I started to make longer pieces, and my first piece that I cracked the very prestigious and lucrative Radio National market was masturbation.
Wow.
I made this whole piece about women masturbating and shit. And when we went to pitch it, they were horrified. I thought, like, honest to God, if I was sitting there and someone came in and said that to me now, I'd be like, yes, how much money do you want? Let me write checks. But in those days, it was like, oh my God, they all looked at each other. And we were like, it's this really tops thing, you know? And like we've, you know, rolled microphones with condoms and stuck them up ourselves, masturbated over the top. The backgrounds are great, and you can just see them just dying. But anyway, what we've done was a short cut up. And I have to say, for anyone who wants to freelance, have something to play, you know, because oddly, we'd got dressed up, me and my friend, in these outfits, gone to Central Station and interviewed people about masturbating. So you've got this very public space there, trade on track platform, while someone's going, and then I touch myself with the feather or whatever, you know. Anyway, so they loved it. So that was my first breakthrough piece. And pretty much since then, I've been able to sell them any crazy idea, including disability fetishes, people who want to be disabled, men and housework, some of the big controversial
big
issues
questions of
about
this time.
time. So, and it just keeps happening. I just sold Freak Pride to Radio National. And part of the deal is I get a media pass to the Paralympics in London next year to cover for Radio National. Yes!
Wow.
Have you ever been to the Paralympics?
No.
Oh, don't get me started. Cripple Nation. I clear it up a bit.
So what are you going to do at the Paralympics?
Well, the latest idea is to get funding to take a TV crew over to cover my preparation for my big burlesque strip act at Dada Fest in Liverpool, this big disability arts festival, huge, prestigious and cheap, next year, just before the Paralympics. So the idea is we get the Aussie crew to come over, cover that, because it's going to be like pretty crazy, and then go to the Paralympics and just like get drunk.
Wow. Kath Duncan, it's clear to me there's no stopping you.
Indeedy.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
You've been watching Ben TV. We'll see you next week.